This is Brian with Black Arbs, and today I'm going to show you how to properly align your data time zones with your time zone or the time zone that you wish to analyze the data in. And so, one of the little known or little thought about intricacies of dealing with time series data is that when you access the data, you have to also consider what is the time zone of the data that you are accessing. And so it's typical to sometimes have the data always in UTC default. Sometimes it'll be based on the exchange of the asset. So, for example, if it's a futures data feed that you're accessing, it'll be uh, it'll be localized to CME time, Chicago time, but it's important to check that and to know. And so this situation was actually pretty tricky because the data that I'm accessing here was actually the time zone is actually stamped or localized to the computer that accessed the data. And I'd actually haven't encountered that before. And so I had to actually look up the policy of the data provider to find out what time zone it was being used. And so I'm going to show you how to resolve that and avoid the problem that I had when I used or when I initially overlooked this. So you can see the code here. It's very basic. We have my initial functions to access the data, and this is Euro USD. And so first I'm going to just grab the data as it is. Okay, so let's see if there is any time zone info attached to the index. So just on first glance, we see that it's time zone naive, but you can also check, I believe like this. And if it's none type or none, which is a blank, then that indicates that your time series or time zone index does not have any time zone information. So what I'm going to need to do is use Pandas. They have a TZ localized function. So first I'm going to localize it to the correct time zone of the data set. And again, the data set is based on the computer or the location of the computer that was used to access it. And the computer that was used to access this data was based out of Brazil. So I need a Brazilian time zone. And so that's what that is here. And then we're going to convert it because I prefer to look at my data and analyze it typically in New York time zone. And so we can use TZ convert after we've localized the data. So here, I'm going to show you that here. So let's take a look at the index. So here you can see it says New York. Perfect. And then if we wanted to look at an individual here, now you can see that there is time zone info attached to the individual um, timestamps as well. So now that we've successfully converted our index to the appropriate time zone, now we want to simulate what would happen if we do a very common analytical operation where we want to select a particular time frame of data. So in this example, I wanted to look at 2:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. But we can see just basic timestamp. But what happens if we do this? we get an error. So this is actually good. So it's telling us that we cannot compare time zone naive and time zone aware datetime like objects. So you can imagine if we didn't get this error, what kind of issues we would have in our analysis. And that's because the timestamps itself don't have any time zone information. See, it's none type. So what we need to do is localize it to the correct time zone. Now, one thing I want to show you is if that you want to, again, be careful and make sure that you're consistent with the time zones that you localize it to. Because, for example, if we were to try to localize it to Chicago, so we wanted 2:30 a.m. New York, our index is in New York time zone. This is localized to Chicago, and so it does not return the correct slice of data. Instead, it's 3:30 and we want it 2:30. So we got to make sure that we are localizing to the correct time zone. So in this case, this will be New York again. And so here we go. Now we just check the time zone, make sure it's correct. See that here, 2:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. So everything's aligned, and we can also double check just by looking at the timestamp. And we can see that it has the correct time zone information. So hopefully this is of value to you and you can avoid any issues with your data sets. And remember, wherever you pull your data from, you need to make sure that it is standardized to one time zone as necessary for your analysis. So if you have multiple sources of data, you need to make sure you understand the datetime policy or the time zone policy of each source of data and each data provider. If you like tips and tricks like this, if you like Python as it applies to algorithmic trading, please share, like, and subscribe. And eventually, I will be showing you how to develop your own trading algorithm using Python. Thanks.